How This Year's Pumpkin Carving Went Horribly Wrong. Written by ConstantReader04. When I first carved into that pumpkin, I had no idea what would be waiting inside. We have lived in this house for 8 years, and in all that time, we had never seen a pumpkin patch growing in a little clearing in the sparse wooded area behind our house. And we are out there frequently enough. My husband built our daughter Allie a treehouse out there. But there it was. It seemed to have sprung up overnight. Allie was the first to discover it. "Mommy, Mom!" she yelled as she flung the back door open. She was sweaty and out of breath. Her soft brown curls were plastered to her neck, and her cheeks were red from the cool air. "Allie, I'm right here. Don't shout," I said, looking up from my book. "Is everything okay?" I heard her sigh in frustration, and she tried again. "Mom, you won't believe this," she said, in a voice more suited for indoors on a Sunday afternoon. "You have to come see. You just have to." Her voice started to rise again in excitement. I set my book aside and gave her my attention. "Okay, what is it that I must see that requires me to get up from my favorite seat where I'm all warm and cozy?" I kidded her. I was already getting up to grab my coat. "I hope it's your dad in the driveway with a new car for me." "Even better," she said breathlessly. Her eyes sparkled as she said, "It is a surprise, though." She smiled and bounded out the door, and I followed. She led me across the yard and through the little gate. "Come on." She motioned for me to move faster. We walked past her treehouse and entered the little clearing on the other side. She ran ahead of me, stopped, and turned around with a huge smile. She stuck out her hands like a representative from the Home Shopping Network as she presented her surprise. "Ta-da!" she said excitedly. At first, all I saw was brown grass. Then I focused on the area she was pointing in. "Oh, Allie, how cute! You didn't tell me you planted pumpkin seeds?" I exclaimed. I walked up beside her and studied the pumpkins. "I didn't. They were just here. I was playing in the treehouse and saw them out of the window. How cool is that?" She knelt down and caressed one. It was then that I noticed something strange about the pumpkin patch. Most of the pumpkins were small, too small to carve. They looked withered and the color was off. They were more of a sickly brown color than orange, and a lot of them had holes in them. Except one. There was one pumpkin set towards the back that towered over the others like a king. It was very large and vibrant orange with cream-colored vertical stripes, much like the smaller gourds you see in the supermarket this time of year. It was perfect. "Allie, look at that one." I pointed to King Pumpkin. She stood up and walked over to it. "Can we take this one home, Mom? You won't have to buy me one to carve this year." She gave me her biggest, most brightest smile. "You'll probably have to help me carry it," I told her. She jumped up and down and squealed in delight. It did take the both of us to lug it back the short distance to the house. When we got it there, we set it on the kitchen table. Allie ran off to find newspaper while I collected the knives, spoon, and the bowl. "Do you want to draw the face on, or do you want me to do it?" I asked when she returned. "I can do it. I did it last year, remember?" she said. Oh, yes, I remember. That poor pumpkin looked like someone had rearranged its face. I watched her draw a near-perfect traditional jack-o'-lantern face, complete with triangle eyes, and 2 stubby teeth in its mouth. Allie stepped back and looked from the pumpkin to me, glowing with pride. "Now for the best part," she exclaimed, grabbing the large kitchen knife I had laid on the table. She held it up and prepared to plunge it into the top of the pumpkin when I grabbed her wrist and carefully slid the knife out of her hand. "Excuse me," I said, giving her the mom eye over the top of my glasses. "I'll do this part." She rolled her eyes. "Mom, I'm not a little kid anymore. I can do it. I'm almost 13. She huffed. "You can do the face with the smaller knives. I'll do the top. Besides, almost 13 or not, your dear old mom still wants to participate and help you. Soon you won't even want to do this anymore." I smiled and tousled her hair. She returned the smile. Then we heard a dull thump. Allie looked around the kitchen. "What was that?" she asked. I didn't answer because I was staring straight at the pumpkin. "Mom?" I don't know, honey. It sounded like it came from this." I pointed at the pumpkin. She giggled at me. "I doubt it, Mom. Pumpkins don't make noise," she said, matter-of-factly. Still, I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Maybe we should wait for Dad. He will be here soon," I said, eyeing the pumpkin suspiciously. "You're being silly, Mom. If you don't start right now, I'm gonna do it myself." Allie reached for the knife, but I held it away from her. Okay. Here goes nothing." I inserted the knife into the top of the pumpkin and hesitated. Looking over at Allie and seeing the excitement growing on her face melted the fear away, and I happily started cutting the top off of the pumpkin. After all, she was right. I was being silly. I cut a hole around the stem and pulled the top off of the pumpkin. Peering in cautiously, I checked to make sure there was nothing wrong on the inside. It was full of pumpkin guts, all the way to the top. A little unusual in my experience, but nothing nefarious. Weirdly enough, it didn't smell like pumpkin. It smelled rotten. But not like rotten vegetables, rotten meat, decay. It was faint, but still there. "Watch out. It's kind of stinky," I warned Allie as I handed her the spoon and stood aside. She grabbed the spoon and dug into the pumpkin. We heard a dull thud. Allie stabbed the spoon downwards again. Another thud. She looked at me. "There's something in here," she said, and I caught a look of worry flash across her face. Okay, just stand back for a second." I took the spoon from her, and she took a step back. I timidly pushed the spoon into the seeds and strands of filament, and sure enough, it met something hard. "What the?" I leaned over and peered into the pumpkin. The innards moved. "Jesus!" I snapped my head up and stepped back. My heart suddenly started beating against my chest. "Mom, what is it?" Allie had taken several steps back when I jumped. She was now standing against the counter and looking nervous. "Just stay back. I don't know yet, but I want you to stay where you are." I turned to look at her, and she was doing as I asked. She also looked afraid, which made me feel a bit more brave. I prodded the pumpkin with the spoon, tipping it upwards and letting it fall back down with a hard thump. I never took my eyes off of the hole. That's when I saw something I can't explain. Something slid its little crab legs over the rim of the hole, and the weirdest creature I've ever seen popped out. It was still covered in pumpkin guts, but it looked like a crab crossed with a spider. "Oh my God, Mom!" Allie exclaimed, and I shushed her. I watched as the creature pulled itself out of the hole and landed on the table. It had the legs and body of a spider, but looked like some kind of alien crustacean. It had jagged pincers on its front 2 legs, and the legs and abdomen were spiny. 2 eyes sat on stalks that protrude from its head, and it had wet tufts of hair on each of the joints on its legs. A long strip of wet hair ran down the back of its body and onto a short tail that was split in 2. It stood on its legs and shook the seeds and filament off. It was a cream color mixed with dull yellow, and after stretching out its legs, I saw it was about the size of an average turtle. It seemed to survey me as I surveyed it. I was frozen to the spot. "Mom," Allie whispered behind me. I spoke quietly out of the side of my mouth. "Allie, honey, be quiet." I tried not to show it, but I was terrified. The thing reared up on its back legs and started swaying left to right. It lifted its razor-sharp pincers above its head and started making an insectile buzzing sound. All of a sudden, I felt mesmerized. My fear gone. No emotion at all. I couldn't stop staring at it, doing its little dance, waving its arms back and forth, back and forth. I forgot about Allie standing behind me. I forgot that this creature was unlike anything I had ever seen. I forgot everything. This creature was all there was. Suddenly, I just wanted to hold it. I reached out my hand to see if it would let me touch it. "Mom!" Allie shouted. I snapped out of the trance I was in and realized my fingers were inches from this thing's face. It stopped swaying, and suddenly its gaze landed on Allie. It let out a terrifying scream and lunged at her. It jumped right over my shoulder with unfounded speed. It was aimed for her face. Allie hit it with cat-like reflexes. She had apparently grabbed the rolling pin from the counter while I was in the trance and smacked the thing right out of the air. It hit the wall and landed by the fridge. "Allie, run! Run to the neighbors! Just stay there and do not come back here! Go!" I screamed at her. She ran out of the kitchen and I heard the front door slam. I glanced to where the creature had landed on the floor and it was gone. Terrified, I pulled open the junk drawer and fished out a hammer. I tried to be as quiet as possible, but I couldn't control my ragged breathing. I quickly bent over and checked under the table. It wasn't there. I looked around the room. there weren't too many places to hide in here. I looked behind the fridge and then decided to look under it. I knelt down and got on all fours, peering under the fridge. I felt sick to my stomach. I saw 2 glowing eyes before it rushed at my face. I yelped and moved my head just in time. The thing had rushed by my head and snipped off a long lock of my hair. Man, it was fast. I didn't even feel it. I heard the front door and someone shouted, "Jane? Janie?" Allie showed up and said there was something in the house. Are you okay? It was my neighbor, Mr. Freeman. I was scared to call out. I didn't see where the thing went. I stood up slowly and backed towards the living area as quietly as I could. I bumped into Mr. Freeman. Oh, jeez, Jane, you scared the hell out of me. All right, now what's going on? Allie said there was an animal or something loose in the house. Mr. Freeman backed up and gave me room to enter the living room. Shh. I don't know what it is, Dale, but it's dangerous, and we should be very quiet. I don't know where it went. I whispered to him. I held my finger up to my lips as I spoke, and I realized I was shaking. He glanced at the hammer in my hand, around the room, then back to me. Allie said it was a big spider or something. He spoke in a hushed voice. Well, kind of, but more like a crab. It was sort of fuzzy, too, I said, kneeling down to look under the sofa. He chuckled at this. Okay, a fuzzy spider crab. Jane, are you pulling my leg? Is this some Halloween prank you and Allie cooked up to get me? He smiled at me and shook his head. Oh, man, I can't believe I fell for it. I uprighted myself and turned to him, ready to defend what I know I saw, but the words caught in my throat. The thing was perched on his shoulder, my mouth open, but no words came out. I raised my hand and pointed. Jane, what is it? He said. Before he can turn his head to look, the thing wrapped its spiny legs around his head. It stabbed its pincers into his eyes, and he shrieked. Blood oozed down his cheeks as he grabbed the thing and tried to pull it away, but it was fastened on. The thing dug its front arms all the way into his skull. Mr. Freeman screamed like a madman. I watched in horror as the creature slowly pulled its pincers out of his eyes and casually snipped off Mr. Freeman's tongue. He fell to the floor and started choking on his own blood. The thing sputtered across the floor to where the tongue had landed and squatted near it. I couldn't see what it was doing, but I assumed it was eating the tongue. I turned on my heel and bolted towards the back door. I reached it and turned the handle when I heard it clicking across the floor fast. I made it out of the door and closed it just in time. The creature thudded against it. I could hear the clicking of its legs against the floor as it receded into the house somewhere. I was about to run to the Freeman's house when I saw my husband's car coming down the street. I ran out to the road and waved him down frantically. He pulled into the driveway and hurriedly exited his car. Honey. Oh my God, Janie, what happened? Where did that blood come from? Where's Allie? He said as he grabbed me by my arms. I looked over his shoulder at my reflection in the car window, and I had blood splattered across my face and neck. I didn't even realize it. Allie's safe. She's safe, Ron, but Mr. Freeman. I cried and fell against him. He embraced me and again asked what happened. I sobbed into his shoulder. He's inside. He's inside our house. Oh, Ron, he's dead. He's dead. I stuttered. He held me out away from him. Jane, I need to know what happened. Why are you covered in blood? He glanced at our front door and took a step towards it. No! I grabbed him and held on. No, you can't go in there. It's still in there, Ron. It killed Dale. I screamed. He put his hand on my cheek. What's in there, Jane? I need to know what happened. You need to call the police, and I need to go see for myself. He started walking towards the door. Is it an animal? I didn't know what to tell him. I was a crying, snotty, blubbering mess. I don't know. It's like a crab, but a spider too. It's dangerous, Ron. Please don't go in there. I reached out as he reached the door. A spider crab? Janie, that doesn't make any sense. I need to check on Mr. Freeman. You call the police right now. Where's Allie? He had his hand on the doorknob and was peering inside the little window. My phone is inside. Look, Allie is at the Freemans. Ron, please wait. I cried as he held up his hand. Jane, relax. Okay, let me go check it out. I left my phone at the office. Go to the Freemans and call. He turned the handle. I'm not leaving you here with that thing. Oh, Ron, please, why aren't you listening to me? You can't go in there. I shrieked at him. He clicked the door open an inch and looked back at me. Honey, I have to check on Mr. Freeman. What if he's not dead but injured really bad? You stay here. I'll be 2 minutes, he said calmly. He pushed the door open and turned to walk inside. The thing leapt at him with lightning speed. It landed on his chest and he fell backwards down the steps. He toppled and landed at an angle on the pavement with a sickening crack. I watched as the bone in his neck broke through the skin, and I knew he was dead. The creature was still on his chest. It reared back on its hind legs and let out a triumphant, chittering shriek before plunging back down and into my husband's chest with its razor-sharp pincers. Hot blood sprayed on me, but I hardly noticed it. It ripped and shredded the chest of the man I had loved for 15 years. The chest my newborn daughter was held against in her first hours on this earth. the chest I always could find comfort on. It ripped and dug into him until all I could see was a bloody hole. I watched as it squatted over what could have only been Ron's heart. It was dining on my husband's heart. I knew I should run, but I was frozen to the spot, petrified. It made circles inside his chest cavity, and I realized with growing horror that it was nesting. It sat in the hole it made in my husband and stared at me. I turned and ran towards the Freemans. When I made it to their door, I heard the sirens. I looked at it. I looked, and it was the police. Allie must have called them. I fell to my knees. Several hours later, and the police have decided I needed to go to the station to be questioned. The creature wasn't there when I led the police back to my husband's body. All they saw were 2 dead men with horrific wounds and me with blood across my face and clothes. Blood from both of the dead men. Blood from my dear husband. Of course, they didn't believe the story about the creature. When I pointed out the hole in my husband's chest cavity and asked what the hell they thought happened, the 2 officers that had escorted me back there glanced at each other and then back to me. Well, ma'am, we won't know for sure until later. But sometimes people can do unbelievably messed up stuff, Officer Jones said, eyeing me with a look of contempt. That's when I knew I was a suspect in all of this. They told me it may be best if I called a relative to come and get Allie because I may be at the station for quite a while. They're telling me now that it's time to go. I don't know what will happen to me, but what's worse is what I do know. I know that monster is out there somewhere. It's loose, and it's dangerous, and no one will ever believe me. Thank you so much for listening to my reading of the short scary story, How This Year's Pumpkin Carving Went Horribly Wrong, written by ConstantReader04. ConstantReader04 has a collection of her stories in one book on Amazon for sale. And I believe that if you have Kindle Unlimited, it may be free for you. But yes, I'll leave a link to Strange Occurrences by N.J. Jones in the description and in the comments. Yes, I hope you enjoyed it. This is actually one of the first narrations that I've done. I've done like reading narrations, but this is the first narration where I went out and asked a Reddit author for permission to narrate a story, and the author actually saying yes. As I believe at that time, I may have only had maybe 10, 20 subscribers at that point. But she still said yes. For some reason, to this day I have no idea why. Maybe she just wanted it to be. I don't know. I don't know why, but she took a chance with me. And ConstantReader04, I can't thank you enough for that. I don't know what your anxiety level is, but when you have to go and ask an author for permission to narrate to narrate this story when you have like no stories, nothing for them to, like no reference. They have no reason to say yes, every reason to say no. And you're just like, oh, they're going to say no, they're going to say no, I know they're going to say no, there's no, but they say yes. It's amazing. I can't tell. Whatever you felt when you gave birth to your first child or had your first piece of cheesecake. What's a really good happy moment for you? Put it in the comments. What is like the rated G, PG-13, please, in the comments. And that is what I felt when she said yes. And then I narrated it. And this being my first narration, I think it was one of my first narrations. I think my very first one was How to Kill Dad. I believe. I'm not 100% sure. But this was maybe like my second one. And this was my first one trying to add sound effects to a narration as well. And I did a horrible job. Let's be honest, it was crap. And I don't know many narrators who could say that their first narration was a freaking masterpiece. So, that's like another reason why I can't say thank you enough to Constant Reader, because your first one isn't going to be great. And it sort of has to be not good in order for you to get good. I wasn't using Audacity. I was just recording it in OBS. And the only background remover I used was in Wondershare Filmora. And their background remover is horrible. And I feel like I've mentioned this before, but yeah, at some point, I believe my audio messed up and I added a techno or auto-tune effect filter to it. It was so bad. I'm curious what it sounds like. I haven't listened to it since I made it unlisted. I don't have the cojones for that. Nope, I can do it. And I will try to take it as, yes, your first narration isn't fantastic. But you had to go through those growing pains. And I hope you appreciate how far you've come. If you're a horror narrator and you've been doing it for a while, I hope you can sit back and appreciate how far you've come. If you're brave enough to listen to your first few narrations and to listen to the ones that you're doing now, and to notice how far you've come, no matter how small the improvement is, it's still an improvement. And you should pat yourself on the back for that, for sticking through it. Because we're not trained. A lot of us aren't trained. We Google crap, we check YouTube videos. So the fact that any of us are improving at all and still sticking with it and digging deep and finding our way out on the other end, a better narrator, I think that's huge. I will pat myself on the back if you pat yourself on the back as well. I'll do it. Good job, Dodge. I'm proud of us. All right. Well, yes, this is my redo. You have a great rest of your week. I will see you guys soon. Take care.